October 20, 1944, Leyte Gulf. Rain hangs low over the water. Salt air mixes with diesel smoke. The surf pushes against landing craft as chains tighten and steel groans under strain. On the beach, men in muddy fatigues guide something that doesn't look like a weapon yet, only mass. A barrel section swung by crane, a carriage dragged by tractor, wooden crates stamped in black ink. This is not a gun built for chasing an enemy through jungle. It is built for the places that refuse to fall: concrete, stone, earthworks, and the rooms where defenders decide to die in place. Somewhere inland, Japanese officers study the new perimeter forming on Leyte and understand what follows when America brings siege weight across an ocean. Every day we tell real stories from World War II. By subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell button, you help preserve these stories for future generations. By October 1944, the Pacific War has a shape that can be traced on a map with a ruler. American power is advancing westward in measured jumps: airfields, anchorages, supply dumps, each one tightening the circle around Japan's outer defenses. The Philippines sit inside that geometry like a hinge. Whoever holds them can threaten the sea routes that carry oil and raw materials from the south to the Japanese home islands, and whoever loses them begins to fight with an empty fuel line and a shrinking horizon. For General Douglas MacArthur, the Philippines are a promise with a date attached to it. In March 1942, as Allied resistance collapsed, he left under orders, publicly vowing he would return. Now, that return is no longer a slogan. On 20 October 1944, U.S. forces land on Leyte, and MacArthur steps onto the beach and addresses the Filipino people by radio. Words meant for morale, but also for history. The first wave is not a single spearhead, it is an entire mechanism. The U.S. Sixth Army, under Lieutenant General Kruger, comes ashore with corps-sized weight and a timetable that assumes the enemy will fight from prepared ground. Divisions fan out from the landing areas with the practical goal of seizing roads, airstrips, and crossings before Japan can turn the island into a locked door. Japan's dilemma is immediate and cruel. To hold the Philippines is to keep the southern lifeline breathing. To lose them is to watch the empire's perimeter fold inward. Yet the opening of Leyte is not a contest of infantry lines. It is a contest of reinforcement, interdiction, and the ability to move troops under Allied air and naval pressure. Even in the first days, the island's terrain, mud, hills, narrow routes, turns movement into attrition. And behind the forward riflemen, another reality is assembling piece by piece. Heavy artillery designed for positions that do not surrender quickly. Fortifications, masonry, and the kind of defensive stubbornness Japan has already shown across the Pacific. What unfolds after the landings on Leyte is not confined to the island's shoreline. Within days, the Philippines become the center of gravity for the largest naval confrontation in history. From 23 to 26 October 1944, Japanese and Allied fleets collide in what will later be called the Battle of Leyte Gulf, a desperate multi-pronged attempt by Japan to disrupt the invasion and destroy the U.S. landing force at sea. For Japan, it's a gamble forced by necessity. The Imperial Navy commits its remaining strength in a complex plan involving decoys, surface engagements, and sacrificial attacks. It is the last time Japan can contest American sea power with anything approaching parity. When the battle ends, the result is decisive. Japanese losses in ships, aircraft, and trained crews cannot be replaced. The sea lanes around the Philippines effectively fall under Allied control. On land, the meaning of that defeat is immediate.
Without naval dominance, Japanese ground forces in the Philippines are cut into isolated commands. Reinforcement becomes uncertain. Heavy equipment is scarce. Air support is intermittent and increasingly suicidal. Defensive doctrine shifts by force of circumstance, from mobile defense to static resistance, from counterattack to entrenchment. This is the environment in which American commanders begin planning not just for Leyte, but for what comes next, Luzon and Manila. The lessons of the Pacific are already written in blood. Jungle alone does not stop an advance, but prepared positions can slow it, channel it, and make every block or ridge expensive. The U.S. Army's answer is not speed alone, it is method. Heavy artillery units, kept out of the early island campaigns due to shipping limits, now have the logistical backing to arrive. Among them is the 240mm howitzer M1, a weapon built in the shadow of the First World War's sieges and refined for a war that now demands the reduction of concrete, stone walls, and fortified urban zones. Each gun arrives in sections. Each implantment takes time, labor, and protection. But once in place, it changes the conversation. It tells defenders that distance and thickness are no longer guarantees, and it tells attacking commanders that some objectives will be broken open not by speed, but by pressure applied patiently, round after round. That pressure will not peak on Leyte. It is gathering for what waits farther north.
The system is complex by necessity. The howitzer is transported in multiple loads, assembled with cranes, and emplaced on prepared ground. It consumes time and logistics, fuel, ammunition, manpower. But once active, it replaces uncertainty with certainty. Concrete cracks, masonry collapses. Positions that once absorbed punishment now fail under repeated, precise impact. In the Pacific, this technology answers a specific problem. Japanese defensive engineering, thick walls, earth-reinforced buildings, tunnel-linked strongpoints had repeatedly blunted lighter artillery. The 240mm round is designed to end that equation. It is not innovative in concept, but in application, brought across oceans to places where siege warfare was never expected to return. For commanders, ordering the use of such a weapon is not a casual decision. Heavy artillery commits the operation to a slower rhythm. It demands protection, planning, and patience. It also carries moral weight. When a commander authorizes 240mm fire, he understands that whatever lies within the target zone will not survive intact. Soldiers, structures, were the spaces civilians once occupied. By late 1944, American leadership balances this weight against another reality. Assaulting fortified positions without overwhelming firepower costs lives with a brutal reliability. The heavy gun becomes a calculation, time and destruction traded for reduced infantry casualties. Japanese leadership reads the same calculation from the opposite side. Static defense, once a shield, becomes a trap when the enemy brings the tools to dismantle it piece by piece. What was meant to inspire resolve now threatens annihilation without engagement. The stage is set for proof, when theory becomes consequence. By early 1945, the question is no longer whether American forces can return to the Philippines. It is how they will take what Japan has decided to hold to the last wall. The campaign has moved north. Luzon is under assault, and Manila, once declared an open city in 1941, now transformed into a fortified battleground, has become the center of gravity. Japanese naval troops and army units dig in among stone buildings, monasteries, government structures, and centuries-old walls. Their orders are clear: delay, inflict casualties, hold ground even when holding it no longer serves strategy. For American commanders, Manila presents a dilemma with no clean solution. Speed risks heavy losses. Encirclement risks prolonged fighting inside a city still containing civilians. Direct assault against masonry strongpoints has already proven costly in earlier campaigns. The enemy is not spread thin across jungle trails. He is embedded inside architecture. This is where the heavy guns arrive as a final argument. The emplacement of a 240mm howitzer is not dramatic in the way infantry assaults are dramatic. There is no charge, no sudden breakthrough. Instead, there is preparation. Survey teams measure angles. Observers mark coordinates. Fire plans are drafted with care that borders on obsession. Each target is chosen because it cannot be bypassed. Japanese defenders feel the change before they see it. Lighter shelling has patterns, pauses, shifts, survivable rhythms. The first impacts from super heavy artillery feel different. The ground transmits the shock. Walls crack rather than chip. Underground spaces that once felt secure now amplify the concussion. The psychological effect is immediate and corrosive. Positions that were meant to absorb punishment now promise only a slower death. Communication lines fail. Command posts collapse inward. Units become isolated not by movement, but by destruction of the spaces that connect them. Still, the city does not fall at once. The heavy guns do not rush. They work deliberately, block by block, wall by wall. Each round fired is an acceptance that this battle will be decided not by maneuver, but by reduction. And then comes the moment when reduction becomes breach, when the theory behind the monster gun produces a visible opening in stone that had stood for centuries. On 22 February 1945, the battle for Manila reaches a point where patience gives way to decision. The focus is Intramuros, the old walled city. Thick stone ramparts built to resist artillery of another century now shelter Japanese naval troops who have turned the district into a final redoubt. Every gate is covered, every approach is observed. The walls are not symbolic, they are functional. American commanders choose not to storm them blindly. Instead, Battery C, 544th Field Artillery Battalion, brings its 240mm howitzers into position. Nearby, 8-inch howitzers are prepared to support the effort. Targets are selected with precision. Sections of the north wall, reinforced strongpoints, and the government mint, which has been converted into a fortified position anchoring the defense. When the order is given, the firing is controlled, not furious. Each round is placed with intent. The shells rise slowly, visibly, then descend with a weight that cannot be argued with. Stone absorbs the first impacts, then it begins to fail. The wall does not explode, it breaks. Cracks widen into fractures, sections slump, dust and smoke spill inward as masonry collapses under repeated blows. The mint, designed to secure wealth, becomes a liability. Its thick walls trap the shock of impact, turning strength into confinement. For the defenders inside, the meaning is unmistakable. The wall that defines safety now defines exposure. Firing ports disappear. Covered movement becomes impossible. Communications dissolve into fragments shouted through dust and smoke. For the attackers, the breach changes geometry. What was once a vertical obstacle becomes an entry point. Infantry units prepare to move through openings created not just by courage alone, but by mass and calculation. The heavy guns have done what they were brought to do, remove the strongest argument the defenders possess. The assault that follows is still costly. Urban combat never ceases to be dangerous, but it is no longer a fight against intact fortifications. The defenders are compressed, disoriented, and stripped of the advantage of prepared stone. By nightfall, Manila is no longer a sealed fortress. It is a broken space, its walls reduced not by speed, but by inevitability. The monster gun has proven its purpose, not as a terror weapon, but as an instrument of finality against defenses that refuse to yield. The battle for Manila will continue for days, but the outcome is no longer in doubt. The immediate result of the breach at Intramuros is not silence, it is movement. American infantry enters spaces that had been unreachable only hours earlier. Rubble replaces walls. Lines of fire that once protected gates now point into empty air. Japanese resistance continues from rooms, corridors, and improvised positions, but the architecture that gave those positions coherence has been stripped away. Casualties remain heavy. Urban combat, even after fortifications are broken, demands close contact. Japanese defenders fight from collapsed buildings and cellars until ammunition or life runs out. American units advance carefully, clearing one structure at a time. There is no collapse in discipline on either side, only exhaustion and the narrowing of options. Yet the strategic meaning is clear. The reduction of Intramuros removes the last organized stronghold in central Manila. What remains of Japanese resistance is fragmented, cut off from command, and incapable of coordinated defense. The city's fate is sealed, not by a single assault, but by the methodical removal of its strongest points. The cost to Manila itself is devastating. Centuries-old buildings, churches, and civic structures lie shattered. Fires burn among ruins created not only by artillery, but by demolition charges and close-quarter fighting. Civilian suffering is extensive, a tragic consequence of Japanese orders to defend the city despite its population and the American need to neutralize fortified resistance. For the artillery units, the mission ends without celebration. The heavy guns fall silent once their purpose is fulfilled. Crews begin the slow process of disassembly, knowing the weapon may be needed again elsewhere. There is no sense of triumph, only confirmation that the calculation was correct. The positions could not be taken intact. Reports move up the chain of command. They note effectiveness, ammunition expenditure, and the role of super-heavy artillery in reducing masonry defenses. These documents will be studied, not as stories, but as instruction. The war, however, does not pause to reflect. Beyond Manila, the lesson of the heavy guns spreads quietly through after-action reports and planning conferences. The Pacific War, once imagined as a series of jungle pursuits and naval duels, has revealed another face: siege warfare conducted with modern logistics. Concrete, stone, and earth have become as decisive as beaches and airfields. For Japan, the implications are grim. Static defense, long favored as a way to conserve manpower and inflict maximum casualties, now carries a fatal flaw. Once identified and fixed, a position can be dismantled from beyond effective reply. The psychological shelter of thick walls erodes when defenders understand that no depth guarantees safety. For American forces, the use of super-heavy artillery confirms a doctrine already forming. Firepower is not simply destructive, it is decisive when applied deliberately. The 240mm howitzer is expensive in time, transport, and labor, but it repays that cost by reducing the need for repeated frontal assaults. In later operations, similar logic will govern the use of naval gunfire, air bombardment, and specialized engineering units. The broader Philippine campaign continues through 1945. Luzon is secured. Japanese forces retreat into mountains and caves, where heavy artillery again becomes a tool rather than a spectacle. The loss of the Philippines cuts Japan's southern resource routes and accelerates the strategic strangulation already underway. Manila, however, remains a warning written in stone dust. The city's destruction stands as one of the war's most tragic urban battles in the Pacific. It demonstrates the cost of turning civilian spaces into fortified positions and the inevitability of their destruction once that choice is made. By the time the heavy guns are withdrawn, the meaning is settled. Japan has not merely lost a city, it has lost the ability to defend its empire's edges without inviting annihilation. The war has entered its final, unforgiving phase, one where endurance alone is no longer enough. The events that unfold between October 1944 and the fall of Manila reveal a quiet transformation in modern warfare. Victory no longer belongs to the side that merely reaches the battlefield first, but to the one that can sustain pressure, logistically, mechanically, and morally. The arrival of super-heavy artillery in the Pacific marks a return to an older truth under modern conditions. Walls still matter, so does the ability to break them. The 240mm howitzer is not remembered for elegance or speed, but for certainty. It demonstrates that technology, when paired with patience, can reduce even the most stubborn defenses without demanding endless sacrifice from assaulting troops. For commanders, the lesson is restraint as much as power. Every decision to employ such force carries irreversible consequences for cities, for civilians, for the soldiers ordered to apply it. The destruction of Manila stands as evidence that once warfare enters urban stone, no side escapes loss, even in victory. For Japan, the campaign exposes the limits of static resistance. Endurance without mobility becomes confinement. Determination without adaptability becomes fatal. The empire's defenses, once thought deep and resilient, are revealed as vulnerable to methodical dismantling. And for history, this moment closes a chapter. The Pacific War moves towards its end not in sudden collapse, but in measured, grinding inevitability. The monster gun is not a symbol of terror, but of conclusion. A reminder that when war turns to siege, the outcome is decided not by fury, but by persistence, preparation, and the unyielding weight of reality.